I am Zalerla, and this is The Joy of Computer Gaming, where we investigate good and intriguing examples of computer gaming history. Today's highlighted game is that marvel with exceeding marvel as Morgiana misses multiple times before making Minotaur exclaim, "Oh my, I think it's my time" game, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. It's a tiled, turn-based RPG created by Stuart Smith and released by Quality Software in 1981. Now, before I get very far, let's take a close look at the cover art for this game. It very much has an 80s feel to it, it's professional looking, and it doesn't prepare you at all for the game itself. This is what the introduction to the game looks like. Yeah, this game didn't blow anybody away with its graphics, but that's okay because it more than makes up for it. This game looks deceptively simple, but there's actually quite a lot more to it than you'd expect. The game doesn't really match the Arabian Nights theme all that much. There are a few references, such as Aladdin's slaves Morgiana and Abdallah, and Aladdin's Princess Butter all being characters you could find in the game, but there are about as many references to Lord of the Rings with, and I'm not mispronouncing these, Stilbo, Merrywater, both halflings, and Celegorm the elf. You don't even fight with falchions or scimitars, they're just called iron or steel swords. You quickly learn from the Sultan that thieves have captured Princess Butter, and it is up to Alibaba to find her and hide her in his house. The game gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can do this, including hints on how you could win with just a single character, Alibaba, or how you can complete the game through a pacifist route. In the playthrough video I'm using, I played through the game with my wife using multiple characters, and we were certainly not pacifists. This game was very forward-thinking about how you play it. Throughout the game, it tells you through on-screen prompts how you interact with the game. You don't need to look at the manual to know the controls or much of anything, really. It takes almost no time at all to figure out how to play the game because of this. Not only that, but it starts out highlighting everything around you with a flashing border and telling you what they are. After a few rooms, it'll let you know that it's the last time it'll tell you, and then it stops. This tutorial, though fairly simple, is a very nice touch and really helps you jump into the game and figure out what all the minimalistic graphics mean. At first, you only start out with Alibaba, but right from the beginning you can summon more characters, up to the entire roster of 17 characters. Every character has their own name, a race, stats, and starting gear. As the game heavily borrows concepts from Lord of the Rings, the races are human, halfling, elf, and dwarf. The more characters you have, the slower the game is going to feel, since the game is turn-based, but having more characters also helps you deal with battles better. When you summon characters, if you chose to play on joystick, you can assign the character to one of the 4 available joysticks on the Atari. This gives you the ability to easily play with up to 4 players, though the manual says up to 17, assuming that each player is going to play a single character and people will be sharing joysticks. I've read that some gaming parties actually did play with a great number of players this way. This aspect alone is great because so few CRPGs allow you to play with other players. There are also 3 characters that'll join you when you walk into the room that they're in, though Princess Butter might not count since she joins at the very end of the game. They pick one of the people that first walked into the room they are in to copy what joystick controls them. This is an interesting mechanic that very few other games, save much later ones like Fallout and Baldur's Gate, use. The stats are simple, only strength, speed, dexterity, and life. Your armor governs how much damage is prevented when you're hit, your sword governs damage when you're a space away from the enemy, whereas your dagger or shiv is used when you are on the same space as an enemy. Your characters do not progress or level up, they can only get better by purchasing new gear. Better armor absorbs more damage, but depending on the kind of armor, it'll decrease your dexterity as well. Better weapons are simply better and should be used whenever possible. A downside to how gear is done is that weapons and armor can have pluses, like +1 or +2, but the game never directly tells you that. The price of the items do. For example, if you find plate armor and it costs 800 gold, it's normal plate armor. If it costs 1600, it's +1, 2400 for +2, and 3200 for +3. After purchasing items, you can look at your stats to see what your new armor, sword, and dagger ratings are, and that's the only way to figure out how well you're doing. The act of carrying gold around can be a tedious one. The more gold you are carrying, the slower you'll move. If multiple characters split up carrying a ton of gold around, when they drop it for someone to make a big purchase, the game will make it so that some of the gold, around 50 to 200 of it, disappears into holes in the ground. This makes it annoying to do things this way, but sometimes it's the best way to cart stuff around. Oh yeah, some chests in the game are trapped, and one of the traps can permanently lower your character's dexterity by 1. The second problem with carrying gold is that some characters can't move if they pick up too much, based on what their strength is. I had a couple instances where a character couldn't move a couple of spaces to the shop after getting the 6,000 gold it takes to buy +2 Rithmail plate. I ended up having to drop some gold, losing some of it because of the holes in the floor, and settling for a less expensive alternative. So in a way, strength governs whether you can buy the most expensive gear in the game or not. Every NPC has a unique name and their own unique stats. They can be friendly, unfriendly, or neutral, and they can be aggressive, run away from everything like the elusive barn owl, stand still like Minotaur statue, or they can be crazy and seem to move randomly like the witless zombie. Friendly, aggressive NPCs will fight unfriendly ones with you. There are also different factions amongst them that will fight each other as much as fight with you. There are a number of them that are set to appear, and others that randomly appear while you're playing based on a difficulty value. You could set that to 0 if you don't want any NPCs to appear in the game randomly, but it defaults to 18. It seems to be roughly a percentage chance each round that a new NPC will randomly appear in a room where you have characters. Any NPCs left behind in rooms that you do not have characters in at the beginning of that room's turn will never move, so leaving that green dragon behind means that you won't have to fight it again if it doesn't make it to the exit with you in a single turn and you never go back into the room with it. If you exit, even most of the game later, it will still be where you left it, just as hard as you left it, which means the state of all NPCs is maintained permanently even if they aren't moving. Combat is simple. You can attack a space away if no enemy is in your space, or you can only attack an enemy in your space if there is one there. The downside is that, though the game handles having multiple characters in a single space just fine, sometimes I've seen up to 8 characters in a single space, and you can only ever see the active ones, so you may or may not remember who's in that space. The same space combat is unique. First, it requires successfully getting into their space, though if you have allies already in that space, you automatically succeed. To get out of it, you need to successfully break away. Both of these actions seem to have a roughly 50% success rate. If you do get away, you lose the remainder of your movement, so you're still right next to the enemy after that, but at least you can use your sword instead of your dagger at that point. If you are worried about dying, though, someone else can leap into a flying tackle with the foe, as the game puts it, and then they will not be able to attack you very easily without both getting away from whoever is in the space with them, and then succeeding in getting into your space as well. Damage is shown in the game by having a unique verb for the range of damage dealt, and making a beating sound for every point of damage done. You've got jabs doing 1 damage, pokes doing 2, hits doing 3, all the way up to the devastating wallops which do 16 to 19 damage, and smashes which I've never seen but I've heard it happens for 20 or more damage. Since most of your characters have 15 health or less, this is a devastating amount of damage. Then, if the target has armor, a message appears mentioning whether it softens the blow or absorbs the whole blow. This is a simple reduction. If you have 5 armor and something hits you for 7 damage, you end up only taking 2 damage. After the armor message, the target makes an ouch sound for each point of damage, and says a phrase based on the amount of damage taken. This goes from a single point of damage with a message of, "Ha, just a scratch," to one of those massive 16 plus damage hits that makes the target exclaim, "Oh my, I think it's my time." It was hilarious when I first played this as a kid, seeing all the silly phrases the game offers. And you might think the sound to tell you how much damage you took thing would be annoying. Well, it's not so bad, and it's kind of amusing imagining somebody actually beating someone else over and over again to give them a good walloping. Occasionally when you hit an enemy, you may get a critical hit which breaks your weapon. This is very frustrating because then your attack will be awful until you buy another weapon. It doesn't happen very often after buying new weapons, thankfully. After combat, you can rest to recover health. It may take many turns to rest up though, as it is random whether you heal from resting or not. If a character dies, they drop their gold, and you can just resummon them again with their weapons and armor intact, so there is no permanent negative to it. If your last character dies, Alibaba will get reincarnated back at the beginning of the game. My biggest grief with combat is that you will miss, a lot, excessively at times even. We had several complete rounds in which nobody was able to hit anybody else. It seemed that later with better weapons we hit more often, but it could just be the way the game handles hit changes with dexterity, because you can't tell an NPC's dexterity, so it's hard to tell. You can also attack other players, so if you want to PvP, feel free. You can also attack doors to try to open them, or walls if you think they will break apart. They give a different message if they can be broken, but just don't budge, versus walls that are unbreakable. Attacking blank spaces usually doesn't do anything, but for some reason occasionally the game will say a door opens for the heck of it, I suppose. There are rune writing messages throughout the game to give a little plot or hints, or just say some plain weird things. Messages tell you how to play the game in the library near the beginning, and also hint at how you can do a pacifist playthrough. Unfortunately, a lot of the messages randomly hurt your character. Aside from displaying the full screen messages, the game never loads from the disk. It also has an internal sequence of the order of the rooms, and each round consists of going through every single room that has a player character in it in order, then letting them all move in highest dexterity to lowest order in that room. If you happen to move into a room with a higher value in the sequence, you get another move that round. If you move into a room with a lower value in the sequence, you'll have to wait until the next round. This makes it so sometimes a character may go over and over again due to them traveling in the right order of rooms. The game has a lot of oddities, such as walls you can break down, some you can walk through, a room where gold drops under your characters as you walk, invisible teleporters that can make you move almost anywhere in the game, enemies that are actually statues or illusions, and so on. A complete playthrough takes 4 to 10 hours, depending on how many characters you summon and how thoroughly you explore, rest, gear up, and so on. The game does allow you to save to disk to continue later, and this feature works great if you're not using an emulator. I don't remember how young I was when I first played this game, but I do remember playing it with my dad when I was 5 or 6 years old. It was such a unique and fun thing to have a cooperative game for us to play together, at least for a while. I don't remember ever actually completing the game with him, though. We probably ended up getting a little bored due to all the missing and how slow the game could get at times. What was memorable about playing as a kid, aside from how easy this game was for us to play, was my dad putting on a really goofy caveman voice for Jot. He called him Jahat. Me Jahat, me break down door. Jahat smash wall. Jahat pound zombie with club. It was fun just playing to get him to do this silly bit. In any case, I stated most of my opinions in the description, so this is going to be brief. One thing I didn't talk about was the map or world of Alibaba. It's special. It's a bunch of rooms that do not fit very well together. Even just the very beginning area would overlap a lot if you tried to piece it together, and it only gets more confusing from there. There are so many ways to go, many you could only go through once before you are unable to use that path again, and others that are only one way. Thematically, the rooms don't even have much to do with each other, as you can go from a city street into a cemetery into a mountain, all three of which are about the same size by the way, to a crystal cave, a split into a maze and a giant astrologer's lab, or the rainbow path that just loops around. It's very fantastical and you certainly aren't bored of it, but it's a pain trying to keep track of it all. I played this game a bit as a kid, so I have almost the entire thing memorized, but trying to explain it, yeah, not so easy. I do like how one of the baddies in the astrologer's area has a message saying he just left the princess behind in the Gemini room and she vanished. You find out that she somehow shifted from the normal Gemini room to an alternate version of it you could only get to through convoluted means. You have to go through the astrologer's maze, down a hidden chute, through a room rife with illusions and little portals where the correct path is supposed to resemble the maze above, and so on through some very powerful enemies like Minotaur, Minotaur statue, daughter of Minotaur, son of Minotaur, even Sunny Boy Minotaur. Oh yeah, there's also a green dragon, a werewolf, and a grizzly bear in there too, just for the heck of it. Eventually you'll get through a room of illusions and arrive at the alternate Gemini room with the princess in it. Leaving the room acts just like the regular Gemini room, so I have no idea how she was supposed to have shifted there. Maybe she was taken away by one of the Jinn. The ending of the game is fairly simple. It just shows a couple screens of text in the same format as the rune writing to congratulate you. Still, at least it has an ending more than just you win, unlike a lot of other games of the time. The Sultan leaves and lets you take the money from the royal treasury, although there isn't really much to do with it after winning the game unless you want to wander the entire map and slaughter everything with top-end gear. Still, if you want to play a short and simple CRPG you can complete in an evening, especially with a friend or 16, and don't care about it making logical sense, I'd recommend you check this one out. Because I was curious, I also did a solo and pacifist run of the game using Alibaba. I didn't look up how to do it until I finished because I wanted to do it for myself. Apparently hardly anybody else has ever done this, as finding information about it online was not easy. I only found a YouTube video with about 1,000 views from 6 years ago that mentions it as well as a way to do it in 5 minutes or less, but it doesn't work if you're soloing. Well, it took me an hour and a half with a lot of reloading as I took wrong turns and a lot of dying. I didn't use the fast Roy G. Biv route as I was soloing, and the werejackal just kept killing me whenever I tried to reach it. Oh, and I had enemies spawning for most of it. You'll need to disable that. Elsewhere, I had to take alternate paths and think of where the enemies moved randomly to plot the right path to move through the game. Aside from some close scrapes, I found a path where you could avoid most everything. However, 2 rooms before Princess Butter is a room with 2 swords and 3 rats that will all attack you. But at least they will fight each other as well. I had to reload so many times in there as I tried to stay alive and to have the swords live long enough to distract the rats. It may have been easier to pick up a lot of money and purchase armor to survive better, but I didn't go that route. As I tried to get back, the tiger killed Alibaba and a random spawn from the beginning of the game killed the princess. Since the game just lets you respawn, I did and respawned Princess Butter as well. Then I completed the game. It gave me a different message and even a personal note from Stuart Smith. I learned that 2 spiritual successors were created by Stuart Smith, Return of Heracles and Adventure Construction Set, which included another full game but was not released on the Atari. I will need to check both of these out sometime given how much I enjoyed this game. After creating Adventure Construction Set, it seems that Stuart Smith disappeared from the world of game programming. Aside from someone claiming to be him posting in the CRPG Addict blog back in 2013, nobody seems to know anything about what happened to him. I don't know if any other software that he's been involved with, if he is still alive, or what he even does anymore. Quality Software went out of business back in the 80s, but I can't find reliable information about what happened to them either. Paul Stinson, who made the cover art for this game, is apparently very prolific in the field even today. His website has many examples of his work, and he says he's worked for almost every major publishing company, making mostly book cover art.